Hi, Patti Wilson here. My business is the spiritual coach, where I do intuitive counseling, psychic mediumship, and I do theta healing. And I also teach and train and certify people as theta healing practitioners. But the reason I'm here today, what I want to focus in on is the issue of emotional balance during the pandemic. Many of us are light workers. I would imagine anyone listening to this video is spiritually oriented and very aware of how important it is to maintain elevated emotions and elevated vibrational state during this pandemic. And it's challenging at times because we are ultimately human and we are affected by this terrible pandemic. So I wanted to give you a how-to, give you some tools to use in order to create better emotional balance. So what do I mean by that? Well, emotionally, we tend to be very black and white, either or. We sort of go to extremes because the emotional mind is very black and white. It's not subtle or rational. And we tend to have emotional styles. Either we sort of emote very strongly, we're very expressive and reactive emotionally, or we may have an emotional style of more of repression. I sometimes call that the compulsion to be happy, or being very optimistic. And if you have to choose, I choose the optimism any day. But regardless, none of us can avoid just the human experience of having emotions that are strong one way or the other, either strongly repressed or strongly kind of taking over at times. So what do we do about this? Well, I have a theory and a technique I've used for many, many years. I was a psychotherapist for 25 years, so I draw on some of the strategies I used then. And this one I love, and it's just so pertinent right now. I called it the toilet training method for the emotional mind. A little strange sounding, granted. So let's look at toilet training. Why on earth am I using that as an analogy? Well, when you're toilet training a kid, you are essentially saying you can't just let this hang out all over the time. You just can't just, be going in your pants all day long. You really have to sort of hold it and express it, so to speak, maybe after breakfast. So we're going to sit you on the potty after breakfast, and that's when you go. And then maybe again after dinner or something. So we're trying to teach our brains, our emotional mind in particular, that part of our mind that that works with our emotional states, and we're trying to teach it to not just let it all hang out all the time. In other words, many people that are really in touch with a lot of their feelings are feeling helpless and hopeless and overwhelmed and discouraged. And I've had two people this week tell me they feel kidnapped because they can't reunite with their family. Um, and even to the point sometimes of feeling depressed and just having no energy and feeling lethargic and disinterested and sad, and all these kinds of emotions are pretty common right now. And if you allow them to kind of take over, they will kind of take over 24 hours a day, and just sort of that becomes sort of your normal emotional state that you're struggling to try to get out of. On the other hand, if you tend to sort of under emote, that tends to be more pleasant, except what happens is we often end up experiencing anxiety because we have all these unfelt emotions, unexpressed emotions, and they will often translate into anxiety, sort of a generalized anxiety or worrying all the time. So these are not good states. So what do? We use the toilet training method. We essentially say to our emotional mind, look, I understand that you need to express this. I love you. I care about how you feel. I want to understand. But you can't just do it all day long. We really need to maintain a really lovely, elevated emotional state, especially during these times. And we need to be able to maintain that most of the time. And I understand that you're really upset, but you just can't interfere in this kind of all day long, nonstop. And then you sit that little emotional mind down once a day, just as you would sitting a kid on the potty, and you say, now is the time. Now is the time to do it. And what does that mean? Well, this is a journaling hour, or maybe a half hour, maybe an hour and a half, but it's a journaling period that you set aside more or less the same time, more or less every day. So it might be every morning at 8 a.m. You give yourself, 30, 40, 50 minutes and you journal. And if you don't like journaling, you can talk to yourself. I talk to myself all the time. So talking out loud is allowed. But it's processing your emotions. And so you're saying to yourself, tell me, how do you really feel? Well, I'm scared. What are you scared about? Tell me about it. And you just let that flow. What are you doing? You're inviting these negative, dark emotions to come out. And you may be really familiar with them if you're kind of stuck in a really kind of depressed state right now or an angry state right now, then those emotions will have no trouble coming out. But if that's the case, at the end of the, say, 45 minutes, you say, well, we're all done now. It's 45 minutes. And you need to go back inside and just rest and just take a little break. And tomorrow morning, I'll be back. And believe it or not, those emotional states learn to trust that there will be an opportunity to express themselves, that they will have a chance to do this, and they wait until the next morning. And then you're not kind of overrun with these dark feelings. On the other hand, if what you're doing is repressing your feelings, you might be feeling anxious, you might be having more physical problems, blood pressure higher, or eczema outbreaks, or whatever. And this is not good either. So giving yourself that hour to say to your emotional mind, I know you don't like to come out. I understand that. But just begin by telling me how you're feeling. Just what's the worst feeling that you have? What was the worst thing that happened in the last day? How did you react to that worst thing that happened? You begin to draw out those repressed emotions. And then at the end of the 45 minutes, that part of your emotional brain's really happy that you're saying we're done now. But you're giving yourself an outlet for expression of something that you've been repressing, perhaps. So this toilet training method for emotional balance works really well. I encourage you to try it. If you need some more help, I'm available, as are many of my Theta Healing colleagues, to sit down with you. And in Theta Healing, we can actually teach you quite rapidly to achieve elevated emotional states. They're quite beautiful states of peace and harmony and love and bliss and joy. And that's really where we want to be. And in Theta Healing, we can also really help rapidly process those emotions, those darker emotions, those repressed emotions that really need to be dealt with. So I'm going to leave it with that, and thank you for listening, and good day.